Hey everyone, and welcome. In this animated explainer, we are diving deep into the absolutely astonishing life of a 17th century underdog. I mean, we're talking about a guy who literally carved an empire out of the mountains. I am so thrilled to take you through the brilliant tactics, the daring escapes, and the really complex legacy of Shivaji. We're going to look right past the myths, rely on the historical sources, and figure out exactly how a minor noble managed to defy the absolute greatest powers of his day. Okay, let's just dive right into this. I want you to picture the scene. How exactly did a minor noble, totally sandwiched between the massive Mughal Empire to the north and the Bijapur Sultanate to the south, actually manage to win? He was heavily outnumbered, totally outgunned, and he completely lacked the immense wealth of his rivals. So how'd he do it? Well, to answer that, we actually have to look at a famous insult. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb dismissively called Shivaji a mountain rat. And yeah, this was meant to mock him, making fun of his tendency to avoid pitched open-field battles and just retreat into his hill forts. But here's the thing. This insult actually highlights his absolute greatest strategic advantage. He completely mastered asymmetric warfare. He used the incredibly difficult local terrain of the Deccan Plateau not to hide, but to exhaust and trap these massive, slow-moving enemy armies. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The Rebel of the Deccan. 2. Combating the Bijapur Sultanate. 3. Outsmarting the Mughal Empire. 4. Crowning a Maratha king. 5. Warfare, navy, and governance. And finally, 6. The legacy of Shivaji. Let's kick things off with Part 1, The Rebel of the Deccan, Early Life and First Conquests. So Shivaji inherited this tiny fiefdom from his father, Shahaji, who was a general constantly shifting his loyalties between regional powers. But Shivaji, he didn't wait around to make his own mark. Born in 1630 at Shivneri Fort, his rise was just incredibly rapid and audacious. In 1647, at just 16 years old, literally a teenager, he takes advantage of some political chaos in the Bijapur court and actually captures Torna Fort using pure stratagem. And with the immense treasury he found there, he goes and builds his own capital, Rajgad. Fast forward to 1656, and he seizes the highly strategic valley of Javali. In just a few short years, this kid quietly built up his wealth, his fortresses, and a fiercely loyal, localized power base. Moving on to Part 2, Combating the Bijapur Sultanate, the Battle of Pratapgarh. Eventually, the Bijapur government realizes they've got a serious problem on their hands, so they send this giant veteran general named Afzal Khan to crush the young rebel. It's the ultimate David versus Goliath setup. Afzal Khan rolls in with a massive army and powerful cavalry, but he runs into a wall. He can't get his heavy siege equipment up to Shivaji's mountain fort. So they agree to what is supposed to be an unarmed, totally private negotiation in a tent. But Shivaji was sharp. He suspected a trap and came prepared. He's got chainmail armor hidden beneath his clothes, a concealed dagger, and, famously, he slipped a metal tiger claw onto his hand. When the two men embraced, a struggle broke out. Khan's dagger scraped harmlessly against Shivaji's hidden armor, and Shivaji used his concealed weapons to fatally strike the giant general. Immediately after striking him down, Shivaji fires a cannon. That was the signal for his hidden troops to ambush the Bijapur forces waiting in the dense forest. 3,000. That is the number of Bijapur soldiers killed in the absolute rout that followed. But here's where it gets really brilliant. Rather than executing the captured enemies, which was pretty standard at the time, Shivaji actually held a grand review, rewarded them, and set them free to go back home. It was an absolute masterclass in psychological warfare, and it won him massive regional respect. Now for Part 3, Outsmarting the Mughal Empire, Raids, Treaties, and Audacious Escapes. So things really kick into high gear with the mighty Mughal Empire, when Shivaji leads a stealthy night raid literally right into the bedroom of the Mughal general Shaista Khan, severing 3 of his fingers and forcing him to flee. Needless to say, the Mughal emperor Aurangzeb was enraged. The conflict escalated in 1664 when Shivaji sacked Surat, this incredibly wealthy Mughal port, for immense plunder to fund his own campaigns. Well, Aurangzeb responds by sending an overwhelming force and finally corners him. Shivaji is forced to sign the humiliating Treaty of Purandar in 1665. He surrenders 23 prized forts and becomes a vassal. The very next year, he's summoned to the emperor's court in Agra, where he's insulted, forced to stand with low-ranking nobles, and ultimately placed under highly perilous house arrest. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer cinematic brilliance of what he did next. Facing almost certain execution, he hatches this wild escape plan. Step 1, he fakes a really severe illness. Step 2, As a show of penance, he starts sending giant baskets packed with sweets out of his house to be distributed to Brahmins and the poor. After a while, the guards naturally get totally used to these heavy baskets coming and going every single day. Then, the kicker. On August 17th, 1666, he and his young son climb inside those very baskets, are carried right out from under the noses of the Mughal guards, and make it all the way back to the Deccan. Just incredible.
Part 4, Crowning a Maratha King, Legitimizing the Chhatrapati.
All right, so he's back home. Shivaji immediately launches a massive offensive and actually recovers his lost territories. But he hits a major structural problem. See, legally speaking, he was still just considered a rebellious noble. That made him vulnerable to challenges from other equal Maratha lords. To fix this, he orchestrates this massive, incredibly expensive political maneuver. At first, the local Brahmins flat out refused to crown him, basically pointing to his family's farming village origins. So they bring in a prominent Pandit from Varanasi, who, very conveniently, discovers a genealogy connecting Shivaji to ancient royal Rajput lineages. After doing rites of penance in a sacred thread ceremony, on June 6, 1674, he is officially crowned Chhatrapati, Lord of the Umbrella, which totally legitimizes his rule over this brand new independent kingdom. Part 5, Warfare, Navy, and Governance, the Infrastructure of an Empire. Okay, so how do you actually run a newly minted kingdom? This is where Shivaji proves he wasn't just some raider. He was a seriously innovative state builder. He creates the Ashtapradhan Mandal, his council of 8 ministers. As you can see, he had the Peshwa for general administration, the Amatya handling the money, the Summit for foreign affairs, and specific ministers for the military and justice. This wasn't just for show. It established a highly formalized bureaucracy that ensured his state could actually function smoothly long after he was gone. Militarily, his entire doctrine was based on Ganimi Kawa. Remember that mountain rat insult from the beginning? Well, Ganimi Kawa was a highly specialized form of guerrilla warfare that proved the insult was basically a compliment. Shivaji was a realist. He knew his light infantry couldn't just march into an open field and match heavy Mughal artillery. So he used his deep local knowledge of the hills and jungles to completely sever enemy supply lines. He'd starve out these massive forces and only strike when he held the absolute upper hand. And his innovations spanned across the whole state. He intentionally fostered local identity by swapping out Persian for Marathi and Sanskrit as the official court languages. He locked down his territories with an insane network of over 200 hill forts. And to prevent treason or bribery, he brilliantly put 3 equal-ranking officers in charge of each one. He also recognized something a lot of land-based rulers missed: the absolute need for a navy. He built a dedicated coastal fleet, employing Portuguese experts and lower-caste sailors who actually knew the sea. And on top of all that, he enforced strict morality and discipline in his military camps, which was so rare at the time that even his bitter enemies praised him for it. Finally, Part 6, The Legacy of Shivaji, Myth, Reality, and Modern Politics. Shivaji passed away in 1680, and as happens with a lot of legends, over the centuries, the real historical man has been heavily layered over by myth-making and political appropriation. Our historical sources show us a highly pragmatic ruler with tolerant governments. I mean, he employed numerous Muslim generals, including his own naval admiral. He formed strategic, pragmatic alliances with Islamic sultanates, and as we saw, he literally had to fight to legitimize his marginalized caste origins. But fast forward to the 19th and 20th centuries, and various political movements started appropriating his image. He was often totally recast as a strictly upper caste, purely Hindu nationalist hero, fighting this universal religious war. It's a really fascinating example of how modern political narratives can differ so sharply from nuanced historical reality. And honestly, nothing illustrates that nuance better than this detail right here. Even during the brutal, totally chaotic sack of Surat, the French traveler François Bernier actually recorded Shivaji giving specific, direct orders to spare the local Christian missionaries. He literally said, "The Frankish padres are good men and shall not be attacked." It just goes to show you how multidimensional he really was. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to reflect on. In our modern world, how many other historical legends differ dramatically from their true, complex reality? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the history you think you know.